I know we about to talk about this idea of marriage. I understand this. One of the keys is understanding when it's worth your time. I think the good brother Cam said it best.
When you meet a lady, you're like, oh, bitches is really bitches. You know what I'm saying? They know how to act.
Mm-hmm. This is the G podcast. Make sure you tune in. Cam.
I'm not taking no talk back. You see me blink yet?
There's one thing you can do for me in the short term. That's subscribe on the YouTube page. That would be greatly, greatly appreciated. So make sure you subscribe. Pause what you're doing. Subscribe on YouTube. This is the G podcast. Let's get into it. This is the G podcast where we focus on family, friends, finances, freedom, and our future, and everything else. This is the G podcast. Again, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, and tell a friend. I greatly appreciate the support. Today's episode, we want to focus on this idea of marriage, something that I'm just a huge advocate for. I really believe in the institution of marriage. I don't think it's marriage that's the issue. I know marriage gets a lot of scrutiny. We could talk about all the data points and all the blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, just because you can't hit the head of the nail with the hammer doesn't mean something's wrong with the hammer. Pause. Doesn't mean anything is wrong with the hammer. Marriage in itself, if we just talk about marriage, what's the downside of marriage? Like, if we just talk about marriage, right? Again, if we talk about a hammer, it's a great tool. Could you hit yourself? Could some other things happen and then you get hurt? Yeah, that's what happens. Stuff happens. Marriage is no different than anything else, any other tool in our life. So I get marriage gets a lot of scrutiny, but in my opinion, it's not marriage that's the issue. It's the people involved. That's the issue, the people involved. Furthermore, I think that there's been an intentional attack on the institution of marriage, specifically for the Black community, to further separate us as people. Something that has always been top of mind for people in power, for those who were brought here against their will. They've done their best, people in power, to make sure that the people who were brought here against their will don't get their just due. That's the reality. From the start, they've tried their best to tear families apart, and then post-slavery, the prison system, incarceration, privatized prisons, so many different systematic attacks on the community that just tear apart families. I get why so many people are afraid to get married. But where I think a lot of people go wrong is before we even get married. Before we even get married, are you doing this for the right reasons? Now, from my perspective, I'm going to share what I mean by this and some things that I would just have hard lines, not budging when it comes to certain things and choosing a partner to marry. You can't compromise on certain things from my perspective as a Black man. You need to know that this decision, which has so much risk involved, will at least be worth the pursuit. So we're going to discuss how you can maybe see if this person is worth pursuing, that idea of marriage. But more importantly, I think where a lot of marriages go wrong is before they even get married. And that's because of this idea of a wedding. It's because of this idea of a wedding. That's the thing I want to talk about more specifically today, the idea of the wedding. I'm not here to suggest that weddings are evil. Not here to make that suggestion. Is more of a detriment to the marriage than something that sets you up for success. That would be my argument. And so when I look at this institution of marriage and the risk involved, I look at how we approach weddings, and unfortunately, these weddings create a huge stress and strain on not only the relationship, but also on everyone's finances. Weddings are not cheap at all. The investment, both monetarily, emotionally, time-wise, when it comes to planning a wedding, it can get crazy. It can get crazy. And that sort of stress, when you're not even married, it doesn't, in my opinion, that approach to your marriage is the wrong approach. Treating the wedding as a prerequisite to a marriage, I feel, is the wrong approach. I think we should consider a different pathway that sets up the marriage to be more successful long term versus the way we've been approaching this. You might say, okay, what's the point? I want to help people with this idea of marriage. It doesn't have to be a specific way, and your approach might be off, hence why things might not be working out for you, right? So I'm here to just give you what I found to be a great approach, magnificent approach. It really helped set me up for success, and I would, man, who would I be to just keep this to myself? So I want to share with you how I literally approached getting married, from the engagement to the marriage to the wedding. That's what I want to talk about. And I hope that in discussing this, it will help you feel a little less stressful about the idea of marriage. Because again, it doesn't have to be a certain way. We put too many constraints often on how we approach marriage, when in reality, we're not really looking at the right things. So I want to go over what that was like for myself. And I want to do this because I believe that marriage is critical to our success as a community, and I want them to be more successful. I want marriages to be more successful than what they are. And I truly think the way that we just start the marriage with how we approach stuff like a wedding, and it doesn't set up long-term success. I believe that if more couples approach the idea of the wedding in what I propose today, we would have longer lasting marriages. That's what I truly believe. I truly believe this. Let's see. If you haven't been following, I highly recommend checking out some of the previous episodes to get caught up. I do speak about some of the early stages of around the time I met my wife. When I met my wife, there was nothing like traditional about the pathway from us meeting to us getting engaged to then us getting married. There was no like traditional arc. Everything was based off of what we wanted to do. Not our parents, not our friends. It was about us. I shared that when I met my wife, I was living with an ex. When I got engaged to my wife, I think that might have been the first time I even announced on social media that I had been with somebody else. Otherwise, people didn't even know that I was dating this person. One thing I would highly, highly recommend, if you're serious about this person that you're dating or that you're getting to know, I would highly recommend that you keep that relationship off of social media as long as you possibly can. I would also recommend you keep it off of social media until you have an idea of where the intent is with the relationship. That would be my recommendation. It'll save you a lot of headaches in terms of the embarrassment when things might not go your way. It'll also remove this unnecessary feeling of facade, because that's what social media creates, this feeling of facade. And so my wife and I, we dated for about a year until we got engaged, or until, we got engaged, till I asked her to marry me. And during that full year, we never really posted each other on social media. I can't say that enough. Like, if that person is important to you, don't go just posting stuff on social media. Like, cherish the relationship, keep it sacred. You don't have to share everything. Once we got engaged, this was July-ish 2013. One of the things about me, and this is where I would say I would have this rule and I would stick by it. I wouldn't budge if I were you. Fellas, don't budge. I would not budge. When I say I wouldn't budge, I'm serious. Ladies might not like what I'm about to say. You might not like it. However,
it doesn't matter how you feel.
This is what I know to be true. And fellas, don't compromise on this point. If you are with your girl, hold up.
No.
If you are with your girl and y'all are talking about this idea of getting married, but the only way she's gonna get married is if you have a wedding first, she's not the one.
No.
She's not the one. I'm sorry. If you are having conversations and this young lady claims she's ready for marriage, but the idea of the marriage without the wedding is something that she can't accept, do not do it. That's all I can tell you. Don't do it. Weddings are not a prerequisite for a marriage. They should, in theory, be a celebration. And that's where I propose a different approach. My wife and I, when we got engaged, I told her, I was very straightforward. I told her upon giving her the engagement ring, I said, I'm giving you this ring because I'm ready to be your husband, which is where a lot of you go wrong. A lot of you go wrong because you get engaged, not positive if you even want to be married, which is silly. It's silly. Don't get pressured into just getting engaged if you as a man are not ready to be married. I would argue that no man should ask for a woman's hand in marriage if he is not ready to be a husband at that moment. You should never get engaged or ask for someone's hand in marriage if you are not sure as a man that you are ready right then and there. You don't get engaged to see if you want to get married to this person. That's a terrible reason to get engaged. A terrible reason, okay? Let me unzip this. Jingling all in the man. A terrible reason to get engaged. Don't get fooled into getting engaged if you aren't ready to be a husband. The engagement is not a trial period. You should only be getting engaged to drive to the marriage. When I got engaged, I told my wife, I said that in giving you this ring, we can go get married tomorrow. And I would be as happy as ever to do that. We can plan it out however you want to move forward, but I'm ready to be your husband. That's how I got engaged. Yeah, man, you got to know what you want. You don't go into marriage unsure. You gotta know. And so if you don't know that you're ready to be married, I highly recommend not getting engaged. That's one small thing we can do to help improve this idea of marriage. People getting engaged for silly reasons. If you're not ready, you're not ready. So I gave her the ring and I said, look, we can go get married tomorrow. We don't have to have a wedding. We can have a wedding. Look, whatever you want to do. Now, obviously, before you ask that question, you've had conversations with your partner about their views and would they be interested in that idea. Like, hopefully, you're not just going to ask somebody to get married without having a conversation first, a few conversations, so that they anticipate that y'all are on the same page, right? When you're having these conversations, if that person is someone who's saying, I would never get married without the wedding and the wedding has to take place and it's all about wedding, don't do it. Do not do it.
No.
It's one of the biggest mistakes that people make. People as in men, black men specifically. You set yourself up for failure by compromising because you're emotionally handcuffed, and you're compromising not because you care about the relationship or your well-being. You compromise because you're afraid of her. Can't be a pussy, man.
It doesn't matter how you feel.
You gotta have balls. That's the other reason why a lot of marriages fail. Niggas out here getting married are no balls. You need to be able to have boundaries, establish you have your own code of rules and conduct and you aren't willing to compromise on certain things. You need to demonstrate that you can lead. That doesn't mean being agreeable. It doesn't.
No.
So that's where a lot of go wrong. They be too agreeable because they're afraid of reactions.
No.
We don't care about reactions. Reactions don't deter me from being me, being the best version of myself. I am in control of me. Your reactions aren't going to control how I'm going to act.
No.
So upon giving the ring, I made it be clear. And before even giving the ring, we discussed this idea. And she was like, yeah, I don't need this. I don't need that. I'm like, we'll see. We'll see. So I gave her the ring in July. We got married in September on a border in Texas. 2 Mexican witnesses who barely spoke English. These are the facts. Life is crazy, man. You just never know. Just never know. We got married on that border, and it was just her and I, 2 witnesses, the judge. And again, we had no wedding date on the calendar. We got engaged, and then upon getting engaged, we figured out the most efficient way to get married, not to have a wedding. And this is where I think people should change the approach. I highly recommend that you treat your wedding as a true celebration of your marriage, not as a prereq. I think if we just simply adjust the tradition, the expectation, we can do ourselves a lot of favors and we can uplift this idea of marriage while creating more successful unions. If we get married and then plan to have the wedding a year after we get married, I think that is a more productive way to build a union versus getting engaged, planning for a whole year, if not more, a wedding, not being married this whole time. It creates so much stress, so much pressure on that day. I've now had friends who have done both things. I've had friends who do the traditional approach in terms of getting engaged, planning a wedding, getting married essentially when you have the wedding. And those were some stressed out people, stressed out people. And I get it. I think I would be very stressed out if that was my approach as well. It's a huge decision. It's a lot it's a big risk. You don't want to start things off on the wrong foot. Unfortunately, that's what that wedding often does. It starts things off on the wrong foot. And so I think this idea of marriage, the foundation in which you build is so key. The stronger and more deeply rooted your foundation, I think you can build a more longer lasting marriage. And so we got married on the border, 2 Mexican witnesses. When we got married on the border, we started thinking about where we were going to have the wedding. I wasn't even living there at the time. We were staying apart, but that's when we started planning the wedding after we were married. And then because we're married, this idea of like approaching the wedding became more of a group task because now we're both kind of like, how much does this cost? This is us. Like, we didn't get money from mommy and daddy for the wedding like that. We definitely had some contributions. Shout out to y'all. Shout out to y'all. Shout out to y'all. Shout out to y'all. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. But our parents did not pay for our wedding. They definitely gave us a little help. That is for sure. When we did get married, no one knew we were doing that outside of our parents and like very close circle of friends. So even though we were married for a year, it just was nobody's business. And I think that's where a lot of marriages and relationships go wrong, is that it be too many people's business, whether that be your own family, your own friends, it's everybody's business. And in these days, you put your business out voluntarily. It's just everybody's business. In real time, you haven't even processed your own feelings on this person, on the situation, and yet it's already spread to your network via social media. It's not healthy. It's not a healthy way to try and build with a partner. When we were married for that first year, it changed how I think we approached the wedding. One, and because we were married, there was no stress on like the decision on the day of the wedding, where a lot of people are sitting there about to faint because they can't believe they're about to say yes and commit to something that they're not even sure about, which is already, we discussed, silly. You shouldn't be getting engaged if you're not sure. But I do understand when it's time to sign that dotted line, because at the Justice of Peace, in that courtroom, that feeling is there. It's like, oh, it's happening. You be like, man, this is real. I'm signing the dotted line for this. So I get it. That is a very emotional moment. And I don't knock anyone for having whatever reaction to that moment of truth where it's time to sign and make everything official. So I don't knock anybody for that moment. With that said, this is a huge reason why I'm suggesting you hold off on the wedding until you've actually been married for a little while. It takes the stress away. Now we can actually celebrate instead of stress. We can actually celebrate the union, celebrate the fact that we've created this marriage, this thing that's going to help establish a family and stronger community. That's the whole point of a wedding in theory. It should not be a prerequisite to the marriage. You shouldn't put all this time and energy into something to celebrate something that doesn't even exist yet. That's my opinion. I think you would also look at your actual ceremony a lot differently when you're already in the marriage. You're going through the puppy love, if you will, the newly, like you're going to trim a lot of fat from what that wedding will look like, and you'll still feel good about it. One of the greatest just feelings about having that wedding a year later, one, there was no stress between her or I as it related to that event. Doing events in itself are very stressful, and we still had a planner. We had a planner. Shout out to you. You know who you are. You know who you are. They were very helpful. When you do any type of event with people and invites, and you're doing it in locations where you typically don't spend a lot of time, I mean, that's stressful alone. So just from an event standpoint, weddings are stressful because you're hosting an event with people and food and drinks and all this other stuff. Interacting with vendors, got to make sure that the entertainment is moving and flowing. Like, just from that standpoint, coordinating the event, weddings are stressful enough. But when you aren't even sure that you even want to be married to this person and you're dealing with the stress of coordinating the event, oh my goodness, it's a terrible recipe. I think we're much better served being more sure about the fact that we want to be with this person and pursuing the marriage first, and then planning the wedding second. That should be the new approach to marriage. And I shouldn't say the new approach. It's not new. People have done this. People go to the Justice of Peace, don't have weddings at all. So this is not the new approach. It happens. It definitely happens. It's not the new approach, but I think it should be the normal approach. Maybe that's a better choice of words. It should be the normal approach to getting married. You should get married and then plan your wedding to celebrate what you've created. It eliminates the stress, and I think it will help you make more responsible financial decisions in the planning process in a way where you won't regret it as much. To do that, though, you and your partner do have to be on the same page. This is why I say choosing a partner, the right partner, is key. And I'm going to be honest, fellas, if she is not willing to get married without a wedding, this is not the one. This is not the one. And if you mess around and get married and have that wedding, I'm not saying y'all are going to break up, but I'm just telling you, this is not the one. You could do better.
It doesn't matter how you feel.
If you really, in my opinion, if you really are someone who sees yourself as marriage material, that wedding should not be so high on the priority list. It really shouldn't, in my opinion. If you see yourself as marriage material, but you're so fixated on wedding, that's an issue. Wedding should not stop you from marrying your quote unquote life partner. So I'm telling you, fellas, that should be a hard line. And you should challenge to see what's good with it too. Because if they say it and then they don't honor it, don't be surprised.
It doesn't matter who you are in mind.
Does not matter. Honestly, I think that's enough. I'm going to talk a lot about this idea of marriage throughout the course of this podcast because I think marriage is such a core of what makes family so strong. Marriage. And again, as I said, I don't think the institution of marriage is so wrong. The institution of marriage itself, what about marriage is so bad? You have a partner and you commit to them for better or for worse, etc. You don't let anything come between you. Like, what's so bad about this, right? The reality is the thing that's so bad is when it goes wrong. A lot of the times marriages go wrong, a lot of the times because of finances and uncertainty. Finances and uncertainty. Uncertainty, a lot of the times people get married and they're not even certain that that's what they want to do. So inevitably the marriage doesn't even work long term because they're not even certain about wanting to be married. Shouldn't be getting married if you don't know that's what you are signing up to do. You should want to do that. If you're signing up to do that, you shouldn't be forced into it. You shouldn't be tricked into it. If you don't want to be married, don't get married. And if you claim you want to get married, don't prioritize having a wedding over building a strong marriage. We have to make sure the order of operations goes the right way. I truly want marriages to be more successful than what they currently are. And I think marriages would last a bit longer and be more successful if the wedding came later. That is what I truly think. When we had our wedding, not only was it stress-free, a lot of our friends and family tell us till this day, and this was at this point going on 10 years ago, that was one of the best weddings they had been to. We had a great time. We celebrated what we came together and create. And again, this is only my experience. If there's one thing that you can do to help improve the likelihood that you have a stronger marriage, I would look at how you're approaching your wedding. Is your wedding already putting you in a place where you're going into your marriage resenting your partner? It's not a good place to be. If you are getting engaged, be prepared to get married as soon as possible. That would be the other recommendation. We can't play with engagements as a risk period. Like, let me see what's up with the free trial. That's not what an engagement is. If I could give men any one piece of advice to help just improve or not even improve, to help streamline to the marriage, don't ask for the sake of making them happy. Cannot do that.
No.
You can only ask for their hand in marriage if you're ready to be their husband on that day. That would be my one bit of advice to guys. That's a powerful question to ask someone, and you can't mess around and ask for their hand in marriage, and you don't even know for sure that you want to marry that person. That's not what the engagement is for. Don't do that. I think that's it for today. In conclusion, I'm going to say it one last time. Marriages are not about weddings. Weddings should be a celebration of your marriage, not a prerequisite to get married.
It doesn't matter who you are in mind.
Come on now. This is the G Podcast. I greatly appreciate y'all tuning in. Before we wrap up and hit the outro music, please subscribe. Please subscribe. Especially you made it to this point and you didn't subscribe. Man, come on now. Subscribe. That's what I need. Make sure you subscribe. Follow gshpod, gshpod, at gshpod, all one word, on Instagram, on Twitter, but I think we off Twitter. I'm not sure about that part. Shout out Old Hillside. Definitely want to shout out Old Hillside, man. They released that Centennial official release, 101 release. They're not going to do that again. I did get a couple bottles because I wanted to sip that whiskey. Pause. But we definitely got a couple bottles. I kept one, though, just to keep. We're going to keep that off to the side. But shout out to Old Hillside, man. This is the G podcast. And the hope is when you listen to the G Pod, you get something, some sort of tool or insight that you can use so that you can have a stronger impact on your family, better relationships with your friends, improve your finances, help exercise your freedom, and put us all in position to have a stronger future. This is the G Podcast. I greatly appreciate y'all tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. This is the G Podcast.
But it sounds like you made it just fine.
Weddings are not a prerequisite. Ha. Word. Oh, cool.